Welcome to the Long COVID podcast with me, Jackie Baxter. I am really excited to bring you today's episode. Please do check out the links in the show notes where you can find the podcast website, social media and support group, as well as a link to buy me a coffee if you are able. You should not rely on any medical information contained in this podcast and related materials in making medical, health-related or other decisions. Please do consult a doctor or other health professional. I love to hear from you. If you've got any suggestions or feedback or just want to say hey, then please do get in touch. I really hope you enjoy this episode, so here we go. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Long COVID podcast. I am delighted to be joined on this beautiful sunny evening in Inverness by Karl Robottom, who is here to share his recovery story. So we're going to find out what that looked like, what worked, what didn't, what life looks like now. And with every recovery story, it's, obviously that hope. Someone's recovered, but also, are there some things here that resonate with me that maybe I could try? So there's the hope and the inspiration, hopefully. So I'm super excited to hear what your recovery looked like, Carl. A very warm welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Jackie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's going to be really fun. So before we kind of dive into what the illness looked like and all of that, can you just say a little bit about yourself and maybe what life looked like before you got unwell?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a teacher, currently teacher of English and some senior roles in a school in Leeds. But before that, sort of 9 years ago, I was head of PE in school in Bristol, and it had been PE teacher for near enough 20 years. So sport and exercise and fitness and everything around that was a huge part of my life, really. Played football when I was young enough and able to do that. And then as I got a bit older, got into running and cycling and swimming and just keeping fit and healthy, really. So that was where I was up to. Around the time when I became ill.
Yeah, and that kind of, a lot of people will resonate with this because we know that there were a lot of people who were athletes or who were very into sport and activity and stuff that did get hit really hard with long COVID, sort of unexpectedly, or unexpectedly to us anyway, because I certainly can relate to a lot of what you're saying. I was really fit. Therefore, I was really healthy, so I should have been fine. And certainly part of my journey was unpicking some of that. But, this idea of that exercise being such a central part of your life. And then, of course, well, we'll probably get into all that, won't we? Where long COVID kind of comes along and suddenly that bit of your life that was so important to you is not something that you can do. So
Absolutely.
that, and all that comes along with that. So can you give a little bit of an overview of kind of maybe when you first got ill and sort of what that looked like and how that moved into the sort of long COVID sort of part of the story, I suppose?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was in summer of 2020. So, the first year of the pandemic, really, not long into it. And I must have had a very mild version at the time of COVID, which barely sort of was recognizable. It was before testing as well. Probably had a very mild cough, some sort of smell issues that I noticed that were slightly different, but a lot of the news was about high temperature and a really bad cough, and it wasn't anything like that. So I just sort of didn't think any more of it, really. But from around that summer into the autumn, I suppose, I noticed that my breathing was getting really bad, and that was the first thing really that I noticed, not thinking at all that it was anything to do with long COVID. I assume, like many of us, I guess, that, there was a sort of uh, ICU background to being really ill with COVID, which would then lead to long COVID. And so it didn't even cross my mind, if I'm honest. In fact, I thought I just reflected that I'm probably getting old and probably getting unfit and need to do more exercise. So so that wrongly as it turned out was what I did. I exercised more.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, sorry to interrupt you though,
No, fine.
that you said about having this, presumably very mild version of the
Mm,
initial illness.
yeah.
And that sort of taste and smell must have later on, I suppose, tipped you off because that was that sort of
Yes.
hallmark of COVID.
Yes.
But we didn't
Exactly.
really know that until later on, did we?
No, no,
Um,
that's right.
and then also, as you were saying about the sort of, oh, well, it's the people who were in hospital with the sort of severe acute infections. Well,
Mm,
they're going to be the people that are on ill longer term. Whereas,
yeah.
your COVID was, quote unquote, fairly insignificant.
Yes, it
So
was.
therefore, you're going
Mm,
to be fine. And
yeah.
actually, as we started to learn more and more, it was actually that I think the majority of people with long COVID were people that were at home rather than in hospital.
Yes. Mm,
Certainly, it wasn't just the ICU patients. They obviously had other
mm,
issues coming out of hospital,
mm,
but
of course. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sort of more bog standard long COVID, let's say, tended
Mm,
to be much more in the community, which I think is why it took kind of a long time to really get talked about a bit more because those
yeah.
people were just at home busy being sick,
Yes.
and they
Yes.
weren't really seen by medical professionals until
No.
much later on because obviously everything was, well, in total chaos, wasn't it, at that
Mm,
point?
shut down. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah. So what were you said that you'd noticed your breathing
Yeah. Yeah.
and just sort of assumed that you needed to exercise more, which again would
Yeah.
be my reaction too. So there's no judgment there.
Mm.
What else did you kind of experience into your sort of as you moved into your long COVID experience, I suppose?
Yeah, it was a very strange feeling, sort of like, so I'd work the working week, and get home and be sort of on the sofa for most of the time,
Mm,
just staring out of the window, with this sort of breathing difficulty and just not just this sort of malaise, I suppose, of just not feeling like I
yeah.
had any energy. At that point, nothing like the really bad fatigue that I was to experience, within a year or two of that. But just this sense that this something's not right, within me. I knew myself quite well, really, I suppose. Knew what I was capable of doing, and it didn't feel right. And there was also over the weeks and months, I noticed a sort of weight gain as well, fairly gradual to begin with, but it got quite and it couldn't have been, diet was the same. I was trying to exercise away from that, and it actually got worse. So yeah, so that was how it sort of presented in the early months, really, of it was yeah, breathlessness and weight gain.
Hmm. And then you said that you were to experience much worse fatigue. So I'm taking from that that things sort of got worse over time. Is that the
They,
kind
they,
of trajectory?
they did, yeah. Although I went initially I went several times to the doctors, as you can imagine, with the weight gain. And as part of that, my stomach was really distended, really swollen.
Mm.
Um, and so they sort of started me on the testing for, was there something wrong with the stomach? So there were various endoscopies and colonoscopies that were going on. But of course, it took such a long time to get the appointments because everything was stripped back. So waiting sort of months and weeks really to see anybody or do anything. Um, but and all the while sort of getting worse and worse. And I reached the point, it was the end of a school year, actually, the very last day of the school year. And it had just got to a really bad point. And I was sort of stressed at work as well, tired, the usual sort of thing. Had a really bad sort of experience, couldn't breathe, chest pains, struggling for breath, and ended up on that day being taken to A&E because it was yeah, it become quite severe really. Um, so yeah, that was quite a turning point, really. I had lots of tests done on that day, but as you can imagine, even then, that was 2021. They weren't even talking about it being linked to COVID at all, and suggesting heart test on the heart and the lungs, to as a result of what had happened, really.
Yeah. Well, no, it's obviously good to get tests to rule things out because, we
Mm.
don't want to fall into the trap either of blaming everything on COVID and long COVID when actually there may well be something else underlying that's completely unrelated.
Yeah, exactly.
So
That's
those
right.
tests are
Yeah.
important.
Mm, mm,
But it's also interesting that, even sort of a year plus in
mm,
to sort
mm.
of COVID and long COVID, that connection still wasn't actually being made.
No,
And I think
not at
even
all.
now, for a lot of people, I mean, it's maybe, a lot of people are trying to pretend that there is no COVID anymore and, trying to erase the last 5 years. And,
Mm,
I can sort of imagine why we would want to erase the last 5 years, but at
mm,
the same
mm.
time, that this is still the reality for a lot of people.
Yeah,
But yeah, those connections between COVID and long COVID are still not being made, partly because of the lack of testing and partly because still that lack of kind of understanding.
yeah.
Um, so I suppose in some ways it's not surprising that that wasn't happening back in 2021 either.
Not at all. No, that's right. No, I mean they did sort of ECGs and they tested me quite
Mm,
uh, thoroughly, as you can imagine. They're
yeah.
quite a bit concerned. I think a previously healthy, fit chap, presenting in A&E just sort of out of the blue like this. But they did notice one thing. The only way that they noticed it was when I was called to go in to see the doctor, and when I stood up, I'd sort of wobbled a bit, and
Mm,
she noticed that there was yeah, an issue with the let me get this right, the raise in blood pressure. Sorry, no, the drop in blood pressure and the raise in heart rate, which I now know, from having been told since then was dysautonomia or symptoms around that. But again, they didn't link that to it. They just said that was, that's what they spotted, but that was it. Nothing more was said. So
mm,
yeah, and that then became quite a feature of, how I was really. Um, but sort of, sent on to heart specialists and lung specialists. But again, with what was going on and waiting times, I mean, they were actually closed for quite a long time. They weren't doing lung function tests at all, because of the nature of the test and the breathing into a tube and that sort of thing. So they wouldn't even run it for quite some time. So yeah, it was quite a long state of limbo and waiting
yeah.
with no results. Um, and I've got to say, I'm really grateful to the head teacher at my school. Actually, I'll never forget his sort of understanding, and because I had no idea what it was, nor did the doctors. But he said, "Look, just do whatever it takes, whatever it needs. You've got time. You can." And I think that was, yeah, with no name to it at the time, nothing, no condition I could name or give him. I think that was, that was really appreciated. That helped a lot, I think.
Yeah, and I think, you know what, the employers often get a really bad rep,
They
a bit
do,
like
yeah.
doctors,
Mm,
because there are some really bad ones out there, some
mm,
doctors
mm.
who have, gaslit and invalidated
Oh,
people.
yes. Yeah.
And in the same way, there are plenty of employers who have not treated people well and have not been
Mm,
empathetic and have not listened to
no.
them and have not done the best that they could. Um,
Mm.
so I think it's really important to highlight that there are some really good ones out there. And it sounds like you had a good
Mm.
egg,
I did.
someone
I
who was
really
able
did.
to
Yeah,
to do their best for you.
absolutely. Always checking in, and more than once, I think, called me and said, "Look, you need to go home." He sent me home for my, for my benefit. Really, it was, he recognised that, all was not well. So yeah, so it was hard. Yeah, that waiting, I suppose, waiting for tests, waiting to know,
Mm.
what was going on, inside really. And I think that had an effect emotionally and psychologically. really, as we
Yeah.
all will have done, Googling and reading and yeah, what does this mean? This heart rate and this, yeah, it just, yeah, spiraled really. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's such a difficult thing, isn't it? Because, we obviously want answers and we go
Mm,
to the people who we expect to get answers from, medical professionals.
yeah.
But, if they're not able to provide you with answers, whether it's
Um,
because they don't know or you're waiting for tests or, whatever the reason is, then, you're stuck in this, as you described, limbo, which is really, it's a really uncomfortable place to be, isn't it? You just
yeah.
don't know. You don't know what's going on in your body doesn't feel like your own. It's not, it's
Yeah,
it's just not right.
that's all.
You
Yeah, that's
can't you
right.
can't describe what's going on. You don't know what's actually happening, but you know that it's not
Mm,
right.
yeah.
And that's when we kind of find ourselves turning to Dr. Google, isn't it, out of desperation. But
Mm,
then, Dr. Google is not a place that we want to be looking at. But also
not
there's
at all.
nowhere else to go.
No, no,
um,
that's right. No, no, no. And I think, yeah, being, then inactive, not able to get
mm,
out and about, I think that spirals into sitting and scrolling and, it just sort of feeds into itself really, I suppose. So
yeah.
yeah, that was a hard time. And I suppose that was a good 18 months, I suppose, between being told I needed those tests done for them to then be done, and then 9 months for the results from the lung function test to return. Yeah, which was
Oh,
yeah. And there's no judgment, no blame, no
mm,
criticism, but just the nature of the service at the time and what was going on.
yeah.
But yeah, it was a long wait. Um, only to be told that there was nothing wrong with the lungs themselves. So as many of us, I suppose, has been, these sort of organs in many ways absolutely fine, but clearly there's something not right in there.
We'll be right back. I'm interrupting myself for a second to tell you about long COVID breathing. The fabulous Vicky Jones and I have teamed up to bring you long COVID breathing. We are both passionate about sharing our expertise and experience of the breath and how incredibly helpful that can be with long COVID. We've worked together to develop a course that is specifically tailored to those with long COVID. It's a 6-week course with 12 sessions, all delivered online. The community feel and learning that we're all sharing is such a joy. To find out more information and to sign up for our courses, workshops, and other shorter sessions, please check out the link below, longcovidbreathing.com, or email longcovidbreathing@gmail.com to start your breathing journey with us. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I remember having this experience where I sort of had probably some of the same tests that you did, the barrage of blood tests and, come in
Yes.
and do this
Yeah.
and we'll check that out.
Mm,
And,
mm.
and I almost wanted them to find something
Yes, I
because I
was at that
thought if
point.
they find an abnormality in something, then that
Mm.
gives me an answer.
Yeah, that's right.
And I didn't want them to find anything, but I sort
No.
of did on some level,
Yeah,
because the alternative was that everything comes back normal, which is exactly what happened and what has happened
yeah,
to most people.
yeah.
And then you're like, okay, well now what? And the doctors are like, ah, or the majority are, and then we're
Mm.
back to doing our own research again, aren't we?
Yeah.
Which
Yes, that's right.
is sometimes great and is sometimes not. Certainly can land us in sort of spirals
Mm.
of doom
Mm.
in
Yes,
some
very much
ways.
so. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um,
Certainly that point. And I was very similar, just almost hoping that they would find this thing that then I could say, yeah, this is what this is. This is what is making me like this, and then could deal with it. I suppose that was
yeah,
there was a way forward and something to sort of be able to tell people, but yeah, obviously not to be. Um, so I think by that point, by the time I'd finally received the lung function test results, I'd obviously done a bit of research and was really considering, what was it COVID all that way back, and therefore could this be, um, a consequence of that? And so I put it to him as he gave me the test results. I said, um, obviously relieved that there was nothing, but then, frustration that And he said, I think that's a reasonable suggestion. And so it was him that then suggested that I joined the long COVID clinic, which I did a couple of months later in Leeds.
Yeah. So the sort of it was almost self-diagnosed that was then sort of confirmed
Yes,
by someone else. So it was sort of
that's
you that
right.
had to do that legwork.
It
Um,
was really, yeah, that's right.
yeah,
And and all of the result, the stomach issues, the heart that had been measured completely, and the blood and the lungs, everything had not thrown anything up. And I think at that point they thought it was reasonable to take those steps really. Um,
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
that's why it's such a difficult diagnosis, isn't it? I mean, there's
Mm,
obviously long COVID is not the only diagnosis that is a sort of difficult one, but it's this diagnosis of
mm.
exclusion, isn't it? You know, you
Yeah,
exclude everything
yeah,
else,
yeah,
and then it's the kind of like, well, there's nothing else left, so we'll put you in this bucket of,
yeah, yeah.
unexplained mystery illnesses, along
Mm,
with
mm.
ME/CFS and,
Yes.
sort of
Yeah.
other illnesses of those sort of um, similar things.
Mm,
And, it's sort of like, well, okay, at least I have a label. I have a
yeah, yeah.
diagnosis or a sort of half diagnosis, but
Mm,
that's not useful unless it actually gives me some sort of pathway or diagnosis or action
yeah.
plan. Okay, like, well, great, you've given me a label. Now what do I do? Um,
Mm, mm.
so what did you start trying, or did you have people suggesting things? What did the next sort of phase of what do I
Yeah.
do now look like
No,
for
no,
you?
no, yeah. And this was about the point when I joined the long COVID clinic in that February. This was about the point when I did start to think, okay, I'm going to have to, um, take this into my own hands, really,
Mm.
because bless them, they were wonderful. I really appreciated the people there, and the sessions that I went to online. But what I very quickly noticed really was that the things that they were advising were things that I'd already researched myself previously, and was probably already starting to do. Things like breathing techniques, relaxation, that sort of thing. Um, Although I did find eventually a lot more refined and a lot better things in the end, but at the time. Um, and yes, so I started on the path of trying to instigate my own things. One thing that I stumbled across, and this I don't know, I'll never know whether it sort of clicked that dial, or whether it was, but I'd read a lot about cold water, immersion, showers, that sort of thing, and thought, well, why not? Why on earth not? Let's give this a go. And the first opportunity I had to do that was in the February. Uh, yes, yeah. Me and my family,
February's a cold month.
it is a very cold month, and what better month to do cold water exposure? So we were down to Devon to see my parents who live there, and stayed in this sort of cliff top little chalet. And they've got this wonderful um, swimming pool, in a resort called Westward Ho, that fills with seawater when the tide comes in. Then when the tide goes out, it's left as a swimming pool, a saltwater swimming pool. So I would go down there about 7 in the morning, and frost on the ground, just, yeah, t-shirt and fleece, and just get into that water. And I'll never forget the feeling. And I'm sure other people have tried it and felt that it was horrendous, but there was just this sort of feeling of peace. And whether there was a connection there, a family connection, maybe that had something to do with it. But I just really felt that was making a difference, and I did it every morning and every evening during our sort of 5 to 7 day stay there, and thought this is something that I should probably try and replicate. So we have rivers in Leeds, but I don't think I'd really fancy sort of hopping into them and the canal. So it was cold showers every morning from then on, without fail, really. That's, yeah, started that path of trying, you know, something, anything, just to shift it forward, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I listeners will know, cold water was a huge part of my recovery as well.
Really? Ah,
You know,
okay. Yeah.
it was something that, you know, it was sort of the third big thing that worked for me.
Mm, mm,
And yeah, you know, I mean, it doesn't work for everybody for many
no.
different
No.
reasons. But for me, again, I'm an outdoor person. You
Mm,
know, nature is important. Doing some sort of activity outdoors is important. And I couldn't get up the hills. I couldn't do the big
no.
long cycles. I couldn't go running. But getting into the cold water would give me some of that kind of outdoor adventure feeling.
Yeah.
And yes,
Yeah.
that sense of peace as you get
Oh,
into the water, which doesn't sound
mm,
logical, does it? Because you feel like you should be
not at
screaming.
all. Mm,
But
mm,
it just turns off the busy part of your brain, doesn't it? It gives you that
yeah.
sense of relaxation in the
Yeah.
body. And yeah, it's hard to describe to someone who hasn't felt it, but yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely, completely relates. Um,
Yeah.
and how special that you were able to do that in a beautiful location with family as well.
Yeah.
You know, that
Very lucky.
connection. Um,
Yes. Yeah. That was important. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So that, yeah. So like I said, that then became
huge.
showers of increasing length, without being, so, but just in the morning before work, that was, and then read a lot of work, and I I listened a lot to Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Lab podcast. I think
Oh,
it's very
huge fan.
popular. Yeah, yeah,
Huge
he's
fan.
brilliant. And he had a guest on who something of an expert of cold water exposure. Susanna Soberg, I think her name is, a Danish scientist who advised that the end with the cold, I think, so warm and then cold. So again, that's what I was doing, and that really helped. But with the caveat that it was still quite quite bad. There was still the dysautonomia. It didn't sort of fix it completely, but it did
Mhm.
for those precious sort of minutes, hours, maybe really give some relief. I think that was the feeling at the time.
Yeah.
Um, and then I suppose trying more and more things really. So the Wim Hof style breathing that I tried, obviously, not before getting into any water, or just just to make that clear, that I understand the dangers of
Mm.
combining those two, but that was something which seemed to help as well. Um, and then again, because I like to compound these things, put them together, rather than do them in isolation. I think at one point I had a sort of a morning protocol of about six separate things that I was doing. But when I'd come home, and I'd forced to come home about 4 o'clock in the afternoon because I was just wiped out, really, just crushing fatigue. But I'd regularly try something called yoga nidra, which is another thing that I got from the Andrew Huberman podcast. And I find that really refreshing. Just sort of drifting off and working up. Still a bit groggy, still a bit tired, but there was something that had happened during that time that seemed to make a difference. So yeah, there was lots of things
Yeah.
going on with an aim to.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, I
to
mean the yoga nidra is amazing, isn't it? I can't
mm,
remember exactly the quote, but there's something about 20 minutes of yoga nidra is equivalent to several hours worth of sleep,
that
um,
right? Yeah,
which is
yeah.
amazing, isn't it, when you
Mm,
think about it?
mm,
So it's so powerful. But
mm,
for me, it was something that I found really difficult until I'd fixed my breathing, and that was something
right.
that I had to do first.
Yeah.
And again, as a breathing coach, I find it very interesting that you found the Wim Hof helpful,
Mm,
because that is something I would usually advise people to stay absolutely the hell away from,
really? Yeah,
in
yeah.
long-COVID recovery. So it's
Right.
interesting that that did work for you on some level.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all very foggy now. I definitely did
Mhm.
start doing that, but I'm now wondering whether it morphed into something different, but I can't remember the name. You see, I like the idea of the breathing, and got that, but then I think there was some other method, and maybe the box breathing, or
Mm.
those sort of ideas. So yeah, I don't remember exactly, but yeah, definitely aware that breathing purposefully and consciously, was doing something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Um, so you were kind of doing, lots and lots of different things, fingers in
Yeah,
lots of different
yeah,
pies almost.
absolutely. Yeah,
And they
that's
were all
right.
kind of helping.
Mm.
Um, so, but none of them had kind of, got you the whole way or,
No,
tossed
no,
you over
that's
the
right.
finish line. So
No, not at all.
how did that look?
Yeah, one other thing was electrolytes every morning as
Ah,
well,
yes.
which I realized was meant to, help with the dysautonomia. Um, and it kind of did, but, also tried a ton of supplements. I was probably taking about seven at one point, but actually I took them all away and didn't feel any different. So for me, I didn't feel like they were having much of an effect really. Um, and went into that summer, um, feeling, yeah, just pretty bad really. Not great. Lots of fatigue, lots of dysautonomia. Couldn't get up without sort of swaying, if I was out or whatever, falling asleep, you know. And in all my searches and various sort of, down the rabbit hole, I came across an offer of a clinical trial through Sheffield Hallam University, which isn't far from here, just an hour down the motorway. And so I thought, what have I got to lose? So I got in touch, put myself forward for that, and and yeah, I can only say that that stroke of luck was the thing ultimately, which took it the whole way, really. So it was a 3 month trial, um, and it had a load of tests at the beginning, um, the usual sort of blood tests and physical sort of tests, but also a cognitive test as well, which used a Cambridge app on an iPad, um, and I was feeling really, really rough at the time, and actually fell asleep doing the cognitive test. I was that drained, and that said it all, really. I think
I
that,
was gonna say that kind of gives you your answer, doesn't it?
yeah, that's right. That no wonder that the scores were really bad. I think three of the scores put me in the bottom 7% nationally.
Wow.
Not just the long COVID, but nationally for those tests. Such was the sort of brain fog and cognitive sort of decline, really, I suppose that had happened. Um, but the treatment was a product called Simproof, which I'm aware people have tried, and it's available online and people can buy. It's quite expensive, but obviously it came with the trial. And I received 3 month sort of batch of it to take, and and I'm aware of people who continually take it, and it helps a bit, but didn't do anything sort of earth shattering. But for me, that 3 month period got me to the point of last January, so January 24, of being, markedly improved, really, to the point where I was able to get back on the bike and, get out and cycle, which was, yeah, which was amazing. Um, and I'd still had uh, put on quite a lot of weight, in that time, and I think I was about 3 stone above my usual, which I didn't judge because I don't like judging other people. So I couldn't, judge myself for that, but I knew it wasn't, as a um and yeah, I just used them sort of fasting along with the Simproof, um, and that gradually came down as well as improving the symptoms. So what maybe just bespoke to me, maybe um, yeah, certainly linked to that sort of weight gain, but for me that was what got me back to. maybe not complete baseline, but certainly a massive improvement.
We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm just jumping in for a second to see if you're enjoying this episode. If you're finding it useful, maybe you would consider sharing it somewhere, a friend, a group, or even on your Twitter feed. If everyone was able to share just once, we'd be able to get this information out to even more people who really, really need it. So please consider sharing somewhere if you possibly can. I hope you enjoy the episode, and thank you so much.
Wow. And did you said you were doing the fasting alongside the Simproof.
Yeah.
Did you continue taking the Simproof after the 3 months, or was that while you were doing the trial?
I did actually, yeah, because part of the trial was and of course I didn't know whether I was on the control or do you see? until I went back after the 3 months. And so the deal was, if it was a control, or rather if it was just juice, not the product, they would then give you 4 months worth of it for free as a thank you for doing it. If you were taking the Simproof for 3 months, which I was, then they'd give you a month free, as a token of that. So I continued to take that. So effectively took it for 4 months, and that really helps. And then I thought, so okay, so what am I going to do next? And I looked up the bacteria that were involved and realized that it was quite similar to homemade kefir. So I bought some kefir granules or crystals, whatever you call it, online, and started making my own kefir so I could sort of, maintain that healthy gut microbiome. See if I could keep that going, because I was really concerned at that time that it could well just, descend back into every day I was sort of, grateful just for feeling relatively normal just for that short period of time, and hoping that, I could extend it as long as I could, really.
Yeah. And then things from there, they continued to improve, or was there a kind of big moment for you?
Yeah, I suppose sort of that January, when I'd done the 3 month trial and I'd been
Mm.
doing little bits of cycling and realized that it wasn't sort of putting me under, and I wasn't having massive effects from it. I thought, this is it now. I feel really, really changed. And throughout all of it, the one reason I wanted to get back to some sort of baseline was just to be able to be active with my kids and with family. And if that's all I could do, then I'd be happy, to go walking, kicking a ball around, going for a run, with my kids, then that's all I wanted. And just so started very slowly sort of walking, which became walk jog. And then I thought, I've got to do something to mark this now very carefully, because I don't want to slip back. And so I started doing a couch to marathon program, believe it or not. Such was my keenness to sort of mark it by saying, like, this is the end, this is the end point. I'm not going back from here. So within about, I don't know, about 6 months of starting that, I then run what was my first marathon. I'd never run a marathon before, although I'd run a lot before, a lot of half marathons, 10Ks, triathlons. Never actually run a marathon. So yeah, that was quite a moment, really, to do that.
That's amazing. And it sounds like, I mean, obviously there's a lot of controversy, or not even just controversy, it just doesn't work, to get people to
Hmm.
do graded exercise therapy.
Oh, absolutely. I
Um,
know. I
but
know.
so it sounds like, you'd laid all this groundwork, you'd done the breathing, you'd done the yoga nidra, you'd done the Simproof, you'd done the fasting, you'd done all the other things
Mm,
that you'd mentioned.
mm,
And then, you were gradually able to increase that activity from a person who was actually very unfit and deconditioned because you hadn't done anything
yeah.
for
Yes,
years,
that's right. That's right.
moving
Yeah.
back from that kind of
Mm,
unfit, because I had a similar experience where I thought, okay, I'm better. I'm going to go for a
mm,
run. So I put on my running shoes, ran out the door, and within about 30 seconds, I thought I was going to die. And I thought, what's wrong? I'm
yeah.
better.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well,
Mm,
I haven't run for 3 years. Of course, I can't run a 5K.
yeah.
So I had
Yeah.
to sort of go through that similar experience where I built up that
Mm,
fitness from that kind of, unfit person who I'd never been before, to this
yeah.
person who was like, okay, I'm an unfit well person. Well, that's
Mm,
okay. I can fix that.
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think we need to call this episode "Long COVID to Marathon." That's one hell of a way to celebrate.
Uh, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
It was. I was really pleased. Yeah. And just, just to put in perspective, I did have the sort of the ups and downs that people experience throughout those 3 years, where you think, oh, I feel a lot better now, and try something, and then it knocks you back. So I'm well aware of this, the notion of graded exercise, and, oh, you
Yeah,
should try and do it. And it's absolute, it's absolute
yeah.
nonsense, because
It
your
doesn't work.
body, it doesn't work. Your body tells
No.
you that you're not ready for it, and I was told that many, many
Yeah.
times, in along that way. But yeah, again, and I'm completely aware that luck, time, fate, whatever it was that took me to that, and whether all of those things that I tried, were not the answer, but just happened to, nudge it along. I don't know, but yeah, I did think this. Yeah, I have now shifted this, and I'm ready to be active again. So
Yeah, this is my
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Well, it
that's
was it
right.
was all
Yeah,
of those things that came together. That was your jigsaw
mm,
puzzle, and some of those
yeah,
pieces were
yeah,
probably bigger pieces than others, but they
that's
all
right.
came together
Mm,
to whatever then worked,
mm,
which then meant that you could safely increase that activity at a
exactly.
rate and at a time that was safe for your body, rather
Mm,
than doing it prescriptively to someone else's timeline. It
yes.
sounds
Yeah.
like you really tuned into your body and listened to your body and did it at the right time,
Mm,
safely. Um,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
uh, and it worked.
It did.
um,
Yeah.
so so what does life look like now? You are what, about a year on ish?
Yeah, just over a year. That's right. That was January 24, so just over a year on. So a few months later, I'd sort of planned in that I would try and do another marathon. Um, and these are just marathon distances. They weren't races. They're just routes that I had on Strava, and knew that it would take me to 26 miles. So I did another one in the autumn. And the ultimate plan was that there's a run in Bristol that I've always wanted to do, um, as a challenge. And before I get to the point where it's, a little bit too, I'm at the age where it's too much of a challenge, which is a 45-mile run around the outskirts of the city,
Oh,
known as the Green Man Challenge. Yeah. And as it stands, hopefully I'll be okay to do that in May this year. So that was the
oh,
sort of the goal that I was aiming for. Yeah, and to be honest, it's going to be a run and a walk. I'm not going to break any records, but just to get out there around the city where I grew up, and see people and places, that'll sort of mark it for me as, you know, where at the end, the journey has sort of got me to, really.
yeah. Oh,
Mm,
that's amazing.
mm.
I'm so excited for you.
Oh, thank you.
So maybe just to finish, we touched earlier
Mm,
on how, obviously this is a very physically difficult journey.
mm.
It's physically uncomfortable and horrifying in so many ways.
Yeah.
But also, you mentioned how hard mentally it was, to not be
Mm.
able to do the things that you want to do. The exercise obviously was a big part of your kind of mental
Yeah.
health.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
we can get into these really, really dark kind of places, can't we, when we maybe feel like
Mm.
we're never going to get better, or that things are getting worse, or I thought I was getting better and now I'm not, I'm back in that crash kind of thing. So I was just wondering, what would you tell yourself, with the perspective of hindsight? What would you tell Karl from 2 years ago, from 3 years ago? What do you think he would want to hear?
Yeah, fascinating, because of course, because of the situation you're in, your sort of negative stories you tell yourself is that this is it. And I suppose that to tell yourself that there is hope, that it will be okay, I suppose, which is easy in hindsight, isn't it? Easy sitting here now knowing that it was okay, and that for many people it isn't, and that that's something that I sort of bear in mind a lot. But yeah, just to stick with it, because I think that sort of spiral that you get into ultimately is, although completely understandable, is maybe not helpful in a sense, to sort of keep positive. I remember actually, because I wrote down a few things, and I think one of the low points was when I joined the long COVID clinic and had to do the sit to stand test for a minute sit to stand test. I remember doing 10 in a minute, and I was wiped out. And I thought, oh, well, that's not too bad, But then I looked up the norms. I looked up the, and the age group norms, and was just, that's really, really not good. And it felt like that was sort of, ground zero, or whatever you term it, was that it can only get better from here, because it can't get much worse. And fortunately, hopefully, with all the input along the way, it did.
It's so difficult when you're in the depths of it, isn't it? Sometimes to imagine that things can get better, and to keep putting in the consistent effort of the little things. But I think that's one of these reasons why recovery stories are so important, because they are evidence that the little things do add up over time, with that consistency, to become bigger things, to the point where people are recovering, like yourself and like me and like so many others. So thank you so much for coming along today and for sharing your story. Good luck with your 45-mile run. That sounds amazing.
Thank you. I think I might need it.
Send me a picture when you've done it. And thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been so lovely connecting.
Oh, not at all. Thank you for having me, and thanks for everything you do as well. You're doing a great work.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thank you so much to all of my guests, and to you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, or at least found it useful. The Long COVID podcast is entirely self-produced and self-funded. I'm doing all of this myself. If you're able to, please go to buymeacoffee.com/longcovidpod to help me cover the costs of hosting the podcast. Please look out for the next episode of the Long COVID podcast. It's available on all the usual podcast hosting things. And do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you.